It's hanging half 100 on them at Owen Field. Or the run rules on the diamond at Lowe's Field. We're giving you the breakdowns, the bets, and the hot takes from the perspective of two former OU Athletics employees. You're listening to the Mainline Podcast with Tyler Burton and Adam Jaquez.
Let's go! Let's go! Go!
Let's go. Welcome to the Mainline. I'm Adam Jaquez. He's Tyler Burton. Season 5, Episode 2. Today we're going to talk through some of the different reports from practice as far as guys that are moving up and down the depth chart, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. I think we'll touch a little bit on offense here, but primarily this will be a defensive preview for the Oklahoma Sooners this upcoming season. And Tyler, how are you this evening?
I'm good, Adam. We do have a few things to kind of talk about a little bit first. Obviously, the preseason AP poll came out. Sooners are kind of getting bitten by the injury bug a little bit. And do we have a quarterback controversy in Norman? Adam, with 17 days left before we kick this thing off, we have reached the point in the preseason where people are using a magnifying glass to look through every insider note, every practice report, social media, video content, trying to manufacture storylines and content. And the most notable, the most recent one, God, it was a gem. It was one that we got yesterday. This was a thing of beauty from Al Eschbach on the Sports Animal yesterday, where he says, according to his sources, Jackson Arnold has been so bad in fall camp that there's a really good chance Michael Hawkins beats him out. And then, of course, that sends a shockwave throughout the fans on the message board and all over Twitter. And then you hear from Brent today talking about how great of a fall camp Jackson Arnold has had. And he's light years ahead of where he was this time a year ago. Adam, I'm just ready for this thing to get here. We're so close, 17 more days, and we'll get this thing kicked off.
I told you before we hit record, but in the words of Gavin Freeman, believe everything you hear from fall camp reports, which is a joke back to last year when Brent Venables said that Gavin Freeman was their best receiver in fall camp. So
it's so true, though.
True. I mean, it's not. I mean, there's going to be some things that are going to be true when the season starts, and some things are going to be like, okay, where was that guy? Josiah Wagner, Gavin Freeman from a year ago. Like, we never heard from those guys. Part of that was injuries with Wagner, but still, when he was healthy, didn't really contribute at all. And now he's, I think, at Cal or Washington. So, things will not be the same. But also, the good reports are never as good as you think. We're hearing lots of good things about defense. The bad reports are never as bad as you hear, like they are with the offense right now. It's just how it goes. So that's kind of our boilerplate, fine print before we jump into the actual rumors that we've been hearing out of camp and overreact to all of them. And so before we jump into defensive preview, breaking down each position by position, I guess we should address the AP poll. My thoughts on that are, big yawn.
Pretty much.
Who cares?
I mean, it's absolutely meaningless. The fact that there's so much hype and anticipation. I guess that there is some form of anticipation of the Bruce Feldman and a few other media guys. They always talk about how, we're 2-3 hours away from the preseason poll being released. It's an absolute nothing burger. The biggest takeaway I had from it, Adam, Oklahoma coming in at number 16. It was looking at the schedule of who Oklahoma is going to be playing this year and looking at the ranking across some of those teams that Oklahoma is going to be facing. Obviously, on the schedule, you've got the number 4, 5, 6, 11, 13, and 15 teams on Oklahoma's schedule. 6 against the top 15, 3 on the road in Ole Miss, Mizzou, LSU, 2 at home in Tennessee and Alabama, and then, of course, one neutral site game, which is actually technically, with it being 2024, it is a home game for Oklahoma against Texas this year. But Oklahoma, kind of about where I expected them to be. I didn't think that they did enough towards the end of last season. There's a lot more question marks right now to where this team, I don't think, could seriously be considered for a top 10 ranking. But again, there's a reason why we play the games, and we'll get this thing going here in just a couple more weeks. But Adam, one kind of dampening point on this podcast, then we'll pick things back up talking defense. Jaden Gibson. How big of a loss is this for Oklahoma going into this season?
Yeah, 1 week ago, knock on wood, we were talking about Jaden Gibson, and as soon as we hit in the stream last week, we heard Jaden Gibson had an injury in practice. So knock on wood that doesn't happen today as we record on Tuesday evening. But yeah, that sucks. That's tough. But I think if there was one room where you had to say, hey, we'll sacrifice a body because we feel good about the depth in that room, I think it is the wide receiver position. I know there's plenty of guys that are banged up, but man, you just felt like Jaden Gibson was about to take over someone's spot, whether that be Jalil Farouk or someone's production. Just felt like, okay, he was about to really break out this year. And that's tough. That's tough. Because now you wonder, like, okay, anytime a guy has an injury and, maybe it's Ivan Carrion, maybe it's Zion Kearney, maybe it's Jaquez Petaway, who knows who ends up soaking up some of his receptions.
JJ Hester.
I still don't buy the JJ Hester hype. Someone's got to be out there in fall camp right now with all the wide receivers sitting out. Some of them precautious, but I just wonder, like, okay, is Gibson going to stay locked in? He's shown a lot of maturity over the last couple of years and progression there, which is great. You love to see that, especially from a wide receiver, not a position group that you typically hear that. But you just wonder, okay, how locked in is he going to be as he sees some guys take his receptions over the course of the season? And is he going to say, yeah, I'll stick around? Because in the day of the portal era, you never know what's going to happen. I don't think there's any indication that he wants to leave, because he could have done that after his freshman year and he stuck it out. But you certainly wonder for that, because I think we're all excited to see him really blossom this year.
Yeah, and I think the best part about the point that you just made is that if there was one position group on this football team that you could afford a preseason injury, obviously, losing Jaden Gibson, a guy that was, just a true difference maker, a playmaker when he was able to, get the ball in his hands a year ago. Didn't have a ton of catches, but it felt like most, if not all, of his catches last year were impact plays, touchdowns, long plays down the field. They had a big time impact on the game and the overall outcome. Most likely BYU is the one that comes to mind for me. But I mean, this is a position group that is extremely loaded. You can thank Emmett Jones for that, both as a recruiter, both as a developer. And now, even though guys like Nick Anderson and Deion Burks, have been essentially in bubble wrap over the last week or so since this thing has happened, there is a lot of talent, there is a lot of depth, and it just kind of puts Oklahoma in a situation now to where you really can't afford to lose one more key guy at that position, going into the season, or, really as we kind of move ahead into, SEC conference play in the month of September. But I think that this is going to give a lot of opportunities for a guy like JJ Hester, for an Ivan Carrion, for a Zion Kearney, and really even maybe a Jaquez Petaway, to be able to go out there and utilize these first 2 to 3 weeks against inferior competition, get them some reps, get them some confidence, and, prepare them, because Oklahoma is going to be relying on at least one of those guys, by the time this thing really ramps up, midway through the season. But again, thoughts and prayers are out there with Jaden Gibson, and his family. We ultimately wish him a speedy recovery, and we look forward to seeing him in an Oklahoma uniform in 2025. Adam, defensive preview. We talked offense last week. Some good responses, had some good feedback on social media. I know that you kind of posed the question, the last couple of days on social media, getting people's reactions on how excited they are about the defense for this upcoming season. And before we dive into this position by position, let's take a look at the big picture. Let's take a look at it from the 40,000 foot vantage point. Year 3 of Brent Venables, Zach Alley, the new addition coming over from Jacksonville State in year 1 as the defensive coordinator. What are your thoughts, kind of big picture, on year 3 of this Brent Venables scheme? Because I think that on paper, this has an opportunity to be the best defense that Oklahoma's had since maybe 2015?
Yeah, I think the goal will be to be even better than that team, maybe even to 2013, or 2009 was really good.
Yes.
So that feels like a giant leap, but I think that's certainly the goal there. I'm looking through the total defensive statistics. 1 year ago, Oklahoma was 77th with 389 yards allowed per game. I think that's not necessarily the best stat to look at. It's usually the overall one that people do consider, that in points per game. But I think Oklahoma can get into the below 350 range, which would make you a top 40 defense according to last year.
Sure.
I think that's kind of the range you look at. And I think part of that is balancing what we talked about last week with the offense and how you run that, and some of the rule changes and things that will be more advantageous for this Oklahoma defense, but also just overall improvements as the guys are experienced, some of them going into year 3 with Brent Venables, having a lot of depth and a lot of positions that we're going to break down here in a moment. But I think that's a reasonable ask. And, you love to hear the leadership across all levels of the defense. And we'll talk through some of those guys like we talked about, with the submissions that we got from social media. So we'll pepper those into the conversation as well. Make sure you're following us on Twitter at the Mainline Pod to be a part of that conversation. But I think I don't want to get too far ahead of myself and say like, yeah, this is a top 15 or a top 10 defense, because they need to prove it quite a bit more. And Brent Venables talked about that to the media earlier today in regards to, how you handle success is equally as important as the way that you handle failure. And I think we saw quite a bit of that last year in terms of post Texas, and then some of the struggles defensively as you wound out the year. Not the best performances, but still a level above where they were a year ago. But how do you build on that and continue to get better?
Adam, as you kind of go through the course of a season, you try to measure, the different, I don't know, you want to say traits, the different, characteristics of what makes up, a top 10, top 20, top 50 defense in college football. There's obviously a lot of metrics that people like Parker Fleming or, Pro Football Focus, they use to kind of gauge how good a defense is from top to bottom. And I think you make a really good point. The most important stat for me, when I try to gauge this ultimately is, how many points per game are you giving up? And I kind of went back and I looked at Brent Venables, from his time at Clemson, his first 3 years as defensive coordinator, to try to compare it to, him going into year 3 here in Norman, Oklahoma. In year 1 back in 2012 at Clemson, 25 points per game. Clemson's defense gave up. You fast forward to year 2, trimmed down just a little bit to 22 points a game. And then year 3, when he had a couple, recruiting classes, his guys that were in the system, kind of like what Oklahoma's going into this year with Stutsman and Bowman and, Dominic Williams, Ethan Downs, so on and so forth, they were able to trim those points per game down even more so to 17. Now, again, I'm not sitting here saying that I expect Oklahoma to only give up 17 points per game on defense this year. If that is the case, then we're having a completely different conversation about, how good this team is going to be able to be and how far could they go in the postseason, 4 to 5 months from now. But you look at what Oklahoma did in year 1 back in 2022 when Brent took over. 30 points per game on defense. Numbers were a little bit skewed. That stretch that they had, where I think it was Kansas State, TCU, and Texas, they gave up close to 50 points per game. So it's a little bit off in the grand scheme of things. But 30 points per game in 2022. Fast forward to 2023, came all the way down to 23 points per game. Now, I'm of the belief, Adam, when you look at the schedule, you look at who Oklahoma's got, week in and week out, some of the road games that they're going to have, some of the elite offenses that they're going to face this year. If Oklahoma, if they can give up 24 points or less a game, if that's the average in conference play in the SEC, I think you'd be silly to not take that right now. Is that too far of a stretch? Or, I mean, when you look at it, you've got Ole Miss, Alabama, Texas, Tennessee with Nico, Brady Cook at Missouri. If your defense is only giving up, 21 to 24 points per game, I think you take that right now as the way that things sit.
Yeah, but I also don't think it's a big ask to say, hey, shave 3 points off of that from what they allowed last year, which was 23.46, get into, 20 points a game or so. And then you're a top 25 scoring defense. They're not that far away from that metric. And really all that is I think, three plays in a row that are better than what you had last year, not allowing a third down conversion. And that starts on first and second down. So put together 3 better plays than you had, a year ago in a game. And I think you can really shave that off, those 3.5 points off and get down to a really good number and start looking really good. But I agree. Like if you're surrendering 24 points a game in conference, like that would be fantastic. Considering, some of the quarterbacks and offenses that you're going to play against. And it's a whole team effort. Special teams got to put you in good position. Offense needs to not put you in bad positions. So a whole team effort there, but I think it's reasonable to say, hey, small improvements there can make a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's kind of focus in position by position group. We'll start in the trenches. We'll go from the inside out. Defensive tackle, Adam. Brent had some pretty nice little tidbits today in his media session, talking about the depth on the interior of the defensive line and talking about that rotation that he's going to be able to deploy starting out here against Temple here in 17 days.
Yeah, he called out, he said there's 9 to 11 guys along the entire defensive line that he feels like they could rotate in. So obviously a pretty big difference along the interior of the defensive line. I think you feel that this group is in a much better position, at least in that first stringers between DJ Terry and Dominic Williams. After that, it's I think a lot of unknowns there. I think you can feel like those first 2 guys are pretty proven, even though Dominic Williams has done it at Oklahoma. He's done it at a high level on a national championship level team in TCU. Behind that, you're like, okay, Jaden Jackson, we're hearing the right things. Is it a fall camp thing? I mean, we heard good things about him in spring as well. So I feel like that's a little bit more solid footing to stand on and say that Jaden Jackson can contribute this year. Grayson Holton, we've heard some good things about. I'd love to hear more about that. And then hearing Brent specifically call out Devon Sears and Champ Sanders, Ashton Sanders there as well. That's encouraging. You want to hear more guys that are going to be able to contribute. And I think we'll see a really healthy rotation of those guys through at least the first 2 games to know, okay, are these guys able to really contribute? Because, at a certain point with Jaden Jackson, I don't think you want to have to rely on him heavily by game 5, game 6, because it's just freshmen in the wall and things like that. So I think this group is headed in the right direction. I think you feel pretty good about it, but if there are any types of injuries, this room could deteriorate fairly quickly, in my opinion. So one to watch for sure.
I think that it's definitely not a stretch to say that this is probably the most talented interior defensive line group that we've had at Oklahoma in quite some time, especially, since Brent Venables has been back on campus. But I also don't think it's too far of a stretch to say that not only are they the most talented, but I also think that the depth is probably the best that we've seen it in quite some time at Oklahoma. Yes, there's a couple of guys, that are true freshmen in David Stone and Jaden Jackson. There's a guy in Grayson Holton that's maybe not quite as proven as a DJ Terry or a Dominic Williams, but the fact that you've got 5 or even 6 and 7 guys, if you want to factor in, Devon Sears and, Ashton Champ Sanders, that's something that Oklahoma just simply hasn't had the luxury of being able to, go into a season with. And, going into the conference, going into the SEC, going up against that style of play where it's just going to be, it's just going to be a grueling battle in the trenches week in and week out. There's not going to be any grace period. There's not going to be any off weeks. You're going to have to rely on, true freshmen and David Stone and Jaden Jackson. And really the thing that sticks out to me the most, it's not the talent. It's not the, the possible high ceiling that I think all these guys can get to as a unit. It's the big thing for me is when you look at this depth chart and you really look at this roster, you look at the fact that, DJ Terry is, playing at 323 pounds, Dominic Williams sitting at 320. You're going to have Grayson Holton, I think, going to be, once the season kicks off, he's going to be around that 295, approaching that 300 threshold. Same with David Stone. Jaden Jackson is already at 300 plus. This is the type of body frame that when Brent Venables got back to Oklahoma, he saw that, okay, we're severely lacking in this. And this is kind of one of the main reasons why once you find yourself in the postseason play, you're going up against an LSU, a Clemson, and Alabama. This is kind of why you're getting your ass kicked a little bit, particularly in the second half. So it's nice to see that those SEC bodies, those playoff caliber rosters that Brent Venables and Dabo Swinney had, during their times at Clemson, you're starting to see that mold kind of trickle down to Norman a little bit as Brent continues to recruit with Todd Bates and Miguel Chavis continue to do their thing. I'm very, very excited. I'm very optimistic as well about what this defensive tackle group could consist of and how they could play this season.
One of the things this defense did really well last year was goal line stands. We had several of them. Even I think one that probably didn't count because of penalty that ended up giving, I think it was UCF, a touchdown.
Yeah.
But you did that last year with really just DJ Terry and not much else. And now you add Dominic Williams, you add Jaden Jackson. There's like some interesting combinations and possibilities there for your short yardage package that you could throw in there, combined with the experience behind them in the linebacker unit that we'll talk about here in a moment. But I think you start to salivate at like, okay, you could get creative with the types of personnel that you're putting in just on this position group, much less some of the other position groups that we'll talk about here in a moment. So I think there's a lot to be excited about on the interior there. What about on the outside there? We've heard some really good things about PJ Adebaware coming out of practice, maybe a guy that's moving up the depth chart. But I think that's kind of the storyline around the edge rushers is like, okay, with PJ and probably our Mason Thomas, like, can we have something to grasp onto, or is it still going to be hype and injuries that stand in the way for guys like that?
Yeah, this is a position group that kind of fits into the same mold when you talk about Javonte Barnes or JJ Hester. I'm just simply in wait and see mode. I've got to see it to actually believe it. And again, when you look at a guy in R. Mason Thomas who, from all the coaches, from, talking to, Teddy Lehman, some of the other former guys that have been out there at practice, they think that R. Mason Thomas is by far and away the best pass rusher on this football team. And this is what Oklahoma needs him to be. Now, he's been bit by the injury bug a little bit over the last couple of seasons. So it's critical that, R. Mason Thomas is able to stay healthy over the course of a full season. But if you compare him with Ethan Downs on one side and RMT on the other, that's a pretty damn good, group of edge guys. And we haven't even talked about the fact that, part of that rotation as well, you're going to be able to bring in a Caden Woolard. You're going to be able to bring in a PJ Adebaware. There's so many different possibilities that Zach Alley and Brent Venables, they've got a lot of different toys that they can play with, depending on the situation, depending on the opponent, whoever the matchup is. Again, we talk about competitive depth, and when you've got a handful of guys that some of which have different skill sets compared to others, there's a lot of cool, innovative things that, Zach Alley's going to be able to do with these guys. And do we have a true difference maker on the edge? I don't know. At this point, you would obviously like to believe so with what you've got in that roster on paper. With R. Mason Thomas and PJ Adebawore, there's been a lot of good things already being said about Danny Okoye, the true freshman from the state of Oklahoma. But again, when you talk about Ethan Downs, guy that's been here, veteran, he's the true captain of that defensive line. I think that this is just simply kind of like what we talked about last week with a couple different position groups. We're just kind of in wait and see at the moment.
Brent Venables pointed out Taylor Wine having a great camp. That's a name that I haven't heard anywhere else. So that's interesting. That makes me wonder if there's motivation behind that comment for one of the edge rushers to potentially step up their game. And I think that's the one piece that, we see the guys in the recruiting ranks. We see the guys in the wings there. We just, out of all the pieces on the defense, all the positions, this is the one where it's like we haven't seen the elevation on the field itself that we've wanted to see. A year ago, Ethan Downs, an edge guy, did lead the team in sacks at 4.5. I think we all love Ethan and we love what he's going to be able to bring there. But we know that there's other guys in that room that should be able to have a higher ceiling. Caden Woolard, I feel like there's a fairly high floor there. It's to be determined where he might go as far as like overall ceiling. But yeah, like a guy like a PJ, a guy like an R. Mason Thomas, like you have to step up and find another level. And I think that's kind of your core four there. I don't think that Danny Okoye is probably going to get like a ton of run as a true freshman. And I don't think Trace Ford has a whole lot of gas left in the tank at this point. He's a guy that I believe was, I don't know if this was confirmed anywhere, but I believe it was rumored that he moved into a NIL type of scholarship. And I think that says a lot about what the coaches think, he could contribute on the field at this point in his career. So I think to me, this room gets as good as PJ and R. Mason Thomas allow it to be. And then you hope that, hey, Caden Woolard, what he was able to do at Miami, of Ohio, he can do that at any level, essentially. He looks the part. He looks like an NFL guy, but I think it really lies in the hands of PJ and RMT.
I think it's hard not to play the comparison game. And when you look at where Oklahoma's trying to get to, and that's ultimately, the top of the mountain in college football, they're competing with the likes of Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State and Michigan. And just looking within their own conference, you look at the model of success and what the standard is for the edge play within this conference. You look at, some of the, absolute beasts that Georgia's had out there on the edge position over the last couple of years, or you go back and you look at what Alabama's been able to deploy under Nick Saban, most notably as of late, Will Anderson Jr., Dallas Turner. Now, do I think that Oklahoma has those type of guys on their roster right now? I don't think so. Prove me wrong. Hopefully. But for what Oklahoma's going to be facing week in and week out, I think that outside of Michigan, outside of Ohio State, and I think you could even throw Oregon into that mix as well, the SEC is by far and away the best collection of offensive tackles in college football. From what Oklahoma's going to see week in and week out, Will Campbell out down there at LSU, most notably the biggest one, he's probably going to be a top 5 NFL draft pick. But for Oklahoma's defense to be able to take that next step, to be able to get to that top 15, top 20 ranking, like you alluded to, Adam, you've got to have a guy that you can consistently rely on. It's 3rd and 7, it's 2nd and 12. Pin your ears back, beat the tackle, get after the quarterback, and make a play. Do we have that guy on our roster? When they're healthy, I think that R. Mason Thomas is probably the closest thing to that we've seen up to this point. But I think that there are a handful of guys in that room that when given an opportunity, we'll see if they can make some plays.
It feels weird to say this, but R. Mason Thomas is entering year 3 as a Sooner, and it just at the same time it feels like he just doesn't have any experience.
Feels like we've barely seen him.
Yeah, we've barely seen him. So hopefully this is the year where all the injury bugs stay away from a guy like him. He's able to actually produce and lead this team in sacks potentially. So we'll see there. Another guy moving down to the linebacker position, Danny Stutsman. We talked about him in the Butkus Award a year ago. I don't think he had enough preseason hype to get that name recognition from a lot of the people that are going to vote for that. And there's a lot of people that just look at the stats and the score boxes and see who has the most tackles. And I think he got hurt a little bit there because he got some injuries later in the year, and that affected some of his numbers. But now the hype machine is in full swing. He's in most places a first team all SEC linebacker, maybe even a all American first team or second teamer in some places as well. So the hype machine is there. And by all accounts, he's leading this defense. He's going to have an even better defensive line in front of him to help him out there. So this should be the year of the Stuts for sure.
Yeah, a starting linebacker's best friend is a quality defensive line group in front of you. And I think that this is ultimately all the praise that's been given to Danny Stutsman. It's been rightfully earned from what he's done over the last couple of seasons. Last year, particularly the huge jump that he took in 2024. And I think that this is a huge year for Danny, not just with what he's able to do, affecting the game, ultimately leading to impacting wins or losses, but this is a huge year for Danny Stutsman, as an Oklahoma Sooner. This is a legacy type season for Danny. And I think it's going to be pivotal when you talk about, being able to, not just get Danny to the starting line in 17 days time, but having him being able to be fully healthy and ready to go for when Tennessee comes to town on September 21st. And like we talked about with the wide receiver position and really the rotation of the offensive line, I think that, Zach Alley and Brent Venables are going to be able to utilize the first 3 weeks of non-conference play to be able to play 5 and 6 linebackers at a time, not just to figure out, okay, who's ready, who can we throw more at, but really just as an opportunity to where you don't have to go out there and play Danny Stutsman, 65 to, 80 snaps a game. I think that that's can probably be the biggest thing that can help Danny, over the course of a full season is not burning your tires up, on the first turn. So again, I love this linebacker position. What a difference, a couple of years make. Gone are the days where you look out there and you've got an undersized Curtis Bolton next to a, stand-up defensive end playing linebacker and David Agwebu. This is a position group that when you look at Danny Stutsman, you look at Kip Lewis, who first team all uniform when we talk about how good these guys look in jerseys, Kip Lewis, the offseason has been good to this guy. And you talk about Kobe McKenzie, being kind of that third guy as well. And we haven't even talked about Jaron Canick or Lewis Carter. This is a position group that I think is going to be the biggest benefactor of having, Dominic Williams, of having DJ Terry, David Stone, Jaden Jackson. I cannot wait to watch this collection of linebacker talent be able to fly all over the field and make plays.
You'll have to subscribe to our Patreon for Tyler's full breakdown of topless Kip Lewis photos and things like that. So link in the description for everybody that wants that. Yes, I agree with you on Danny Stutsman. I think managing his health is pretty important. And I think I wonder how much run he truly gets in the first 2 games of the year. I think Tulane is one where I don't want to compare it to the NFL preseason or anything like that, but I think Tulane is where you start to see like, okay, we settle in on some of our key guys, we get them a lot of run and playing time, and we get ramped up. And I think Tulane is a solid program and a solid team that I think OU fans should be respecting a little bit more than they are now. But I wonder if we see a lot more opportunities in those first 2 games for Kobe McKenzie, for Lewis Carter, for Jaron Canick, guys like that to say, hey, let's continue to build the depth. And this is the one room other than the wide receivers where we're like, okay, I don't know how all these guys are going to be able to play, because Danny Stutsman is basically an All-American, Kip Lewis, potentially an all-conference type of player if he is able to peak out his performance there. So you like what you have there, but I think it's important to keep Danny Stutsman healthy, because we saw throughout later in the year where he was just, I think, bogged down by injuries throughout the second half of the season. And that slowed down the defense as a whole. So you want to make sure that his health is peak throughout the entire year, because he could have a really special season there. As far as like any other guys, I mean, that you think could have an interesting year, Jaron Canick feels like the guy that's forgotten. He feels like he's dropped all the way to third team, but I expect to see quite a bit of him still.
Yeah, I expect to see quite a bit of, the 4 guys that we talked about in Stutsman, Lewis, McKenzie, and Canick, but I also expect to see quite a bit of Lewis Carter as well. And, this is going to be, we've seen it. We've talked about it for the last several months, but you're going to be forced to play 4 or 5, maybe even 6 linebackers this year in Oklahoma. These are going to be guys that are going to, just simply because of the opponent that you're going to be playing, stylistically, what type of offense they're running, or, guys getting dinged up, cuts and bruises. You're going to be forced to play 4, 5, 6 guys at the linebacker position. So that's why it's really pivotal over the course of, non-conference play, the first 3 weeks of the season, that we're able to get these guys reps, get them acclimated, get them comfortable in the system. And then, once Tennessee comes to town, you can kind of, you can take the handcuffs off and you can get these guys, going, 100 miles an hour without any fear of, somebody getting hurt, not having to essentially pull the reins back on Danny or Kip Lewis because you don't believe in the depth that you've got behind them. It sounds like from everything that we've heard, there's not really that big of a drop off from going to your second, third, fourth, fifth linebacker. And that's something that Brent Venables, got to give him and Zach Alley a ton of credit for it.
Will sound like a broken record by the end of this episode, but here we go again. The versatility of what this defense will be able to do game to game or even down to down is pretty impressive, because we talked about on the interior of the defensive line, you can go for, a goal line set. You can go for a 3-man front. There's a lot of different ways you go there. Same thing with the linebackers. We could go with 2. We could go with 3. Heck, we could probably go with a 1 linebacker look if we really wanted to in unique situations.
Sure.
But yeah, you have a stable of linebackers here that you can go in a lot of different directions. And kind of an extension of that is that Cheetah position, which should be manned by Kendall Dolby and Dasan McCullough, assuming that Dasan is fully healthy. I know there's been reports of him being on a scooter throughout periods of fall camp, but 2 guys that we saw some good things throughout last year, especially Kendall Dolby and what he was able to do. I know he was one that was called out from the Twitter crowd there as far as someone that should be a household name. It was Amanda Graves that said very underrated Kendall Dolby there.
Yeah.
And I kind of thought, like, is he underrated? And then I was like, okay, I got to take a step back. In outside of OU world, I don't think anyone knows who Kendall Dolby is, but they should, because he's probably going to have a big year.
Very underrated, but also probably one of the more underappreciated guys from his play a season ago, and talking about Kendall Dolby. And this is going to be an opportunity that, again, we talk about the flexibility and the different variations of this defense that Zach Alley is going to be able to deploy. You might look out there at him, you might see Oklahoma, running a 4-2-5, and then you fast forward 1 or 2 plays later, you could have 3 down linemen, 3 linebackers, 5 guys in the secondary. So again, depending on, what the down and distance is, depending on the matchups who Oklahoma's playing that weekend on offense, you're going to see Kendall Dolby. You're going to see a Dasan McCullough, probably more in situations where he's playing up closer to the line of scrimmage, setting the edge. But I think that Sammy Omasigo is another guy that I don't think is getting enough, talk about, who's a guy that has really bought in and, had the position change a few months ago, going in spring practice, going from the linebacker position to the Cheetah spot. Phenomenal athlete, one of the faster guys on this Oklahoma defense. And I think that Sammy Omasigo is poised to have a big year as well, alongside Kendall Dolby and Dasan McCullough. And yeah, it just kind of feels like it's almost a broken record at this point. We talked about defensive line. We talked about the edge guys. We talked about the linebacker position. When you look at this Cheetah spot, and as we continue to go progress into the secondary, there's so many different guys with different body types, different skill sets. You've got guys that are more built for coverage. You've got guys that are more built to play up closer to the line of scrimmage in the box. It's going to be really fun. And honestly, it's probably going to be a headache for Zach Alley trying to figure out how do you get all of these different guys that are so good. How do you get them on the field at the right time and in these right situations?
When you watch Kendall Dolby's highlights, which we just have done here on YouTube for those watching now, we're taking a look at Dasan McCullough. Dolby's one that you look at him and you go, okay, yeah, he's your guy on passing downs. But about half the clips that we saw here, he was making plays in the backfield, sacking the quarterback or running down a receiver or running back. So he's a guy that truly has versatility. It's not like a sub him out for this down, sub him in for this down. Like, he feels like a guy that can be everything that you need.
He's listed at 5'11", 185. You would think the guy's 6'3", 220 with how he plays the game. Fearless, attacking style of play. I cannot wait to watch 15 in action this year.
Absolutely. And then Dasan McCullough, I think kind of quietly, just a guy that no one's really talking about. And I think part of that is just the hype machine that we saw last year. And he had some really good moments, especially for those watching on YouTube, the goal line stand here that he was a big part of against Texas. But I think maybe we got a little ahead of our skis on him last year. And now hopefully he's being able to adjust into that Cheetah position fully in the way that we really want to see someone in that role. You would like to see him practicing a little bit more and having more, reps with the defense at this point. But, I think he's still something that's very exciting and still a very unique body style and skill set that Zach Alley could use to his advantage.
Wasn't he the guy that he got banged up in the second half of the first game last year? And he was he was battling that ankle injury all the way up until the Texas game. Yeah, I mean, it's just as simple as, you got to have a little bit of luck on your side, but can you figure out a way to stay healthy? And what does Brent say? The best ability is availability. So Deshaun McCulley's got to find a way to stay healthy and be out there on the field because they sure could use him. But again, Dolby, McCullough, Omasigo, Oklahoma's sitting in a pretty good position right now at the Cheetah spot. And Woody Washington could slide over there. Peyton Bowen could slide over there. There's no shortage of talent at that position group.
Let's talk about corners for a little bit. A guy in Gentry Williams who, just like Kendall Dolby, makes a lot of plays both in the backfield and in the secondary as well. He's a guy that's a little bit banged up. It sounds like he should be available and good to go by week 1, but man, you hear the injuries and the kind of the bruises and things that have happened throughout fall camp, and you're just like, man, like I want to feel like he, just like our Mason Thomas, is going to have a completely healthy year because the ceiling is incredibly high for Gentry.
Mm-hmm. Well, and much like we talked about with our Mason Thomas, him being able to stay healthy and be a true difference maker out there on the edge, Gentry Williams, he has the ability to transform Oklahoma's defense, being that lockdown corner, somebody that you could put out there on an island to go against, an Isaiah Bond when Texas, comes to the Cotton Bowl, or a Trey Harris when Oklahoma goes to Oxford. Gentry Williams really gives you the flexibility as a defensive coordinator to be able to call a bunch of different formations and blitz packages, just simply because you can trust 9 to stay out there in one-on-one coverage and really cover the top wide receiver position for the other team. So again, it's critical that he stayed healthy. It sounds like it was a pretty good scare that Oklahoma had with him, in the scrimmage over the weekend, but it does sound like it is not something that's overly serious at this point. Obviously, this is something that, he battled most of last season. It sounds like it is that same shoulder that he re-aggravated just a few days ago. But Brent Venables, who doesn't always tip his hand, when talking about injuries, it did sound like, they thought that he was at least going to be in a position where, come early part of the season, Gentry's going to be out there with no limitations whatsoever. But you got to figure out a way to get 9 out there on the field. I think that, Adam, you talked about this before we hit record. A guy that I really wasn't giving maybe the credit he was due, or maybe enough consideration when talking about starting reps for the opposite corner spot. That's Kenai Walker.
Yeah, Kenai is a guy that Brent actually pointed out in his press scrum earlier today, saying that he was the most consistent that they've had in practice, has looked his best over the last 8 months of the entire time that he's been at Oklahoma. He's actually been here the entire time. Brent Venables has been here after transferring from Louisville. Also mentioned Des Malone, Jacoby Johnson. I think some guys that we're pretty excited to see a lot more playing time from. Also pointed out Jeremiah Newcomb being kind of a dog in camp. Funny enough, I was watching OU Nebraska 2000 the other day, and Jeremiah's dad, Bobby, playing wide receiver for the Cornhuskers. It was just weird to see that, and you're like, man, I feel old. But yeah, Brent said, hey, we're better at corner than any time since he's been in Norman. So that's encouraging to hear. I think Kenai's a guy that people kind of forget about for the same reason, maybe similar to Desana in terms of like, yeah, there was hype coming into Norman when he first came here, and then it didn't quite come together immediately. But I think there was good moments that we saw from Kenai last year, and so you like that. Okay, hey, if Gentry is hurt, you've got Mr. Experience over on the other side in Woody Washington. And so if Gentry's out, okay, Kenai's got a lot of experience, or you've got some really young guys like Jacoby that played a decent amount last year. And you know what? We didn't really notice Jacoby when he was out there, which when you're a corner, that's a great thing to hear. Because typically if you're a true freshman, the other team's going to pick on you. We didn't hear that with Jacoby Johnson. So I think you've got some really good building blocks there, despite the potential health issues with Gentry. But man, if you can keep Gentry healthy, like that guy is maybe the highest draft pick on this defense.
Oh, absolutely. It's a game changer. 100%. Yeah. You've got Gentry Williams, you've got Kenai Walker, you've got Woody Washington, who we think he's going to start out there at cornerback week 1 against Temple. But ultimately we'll see how he kind of rotates around playing some of those different positions in the secondary. But I do think that, again, Brandon Hall, Jay Valai, they've done a really good job. Des Malone's another guy. When you look at, what a premier SEC corner looks like, with his size and stature, Des Malone foots the bill as well. Jacoby Johnson is a guy who's probably top 3, top 5 athlete on the entire football team right now at his size and his speed and his football instincts as well. I think Jacoby's going to have an opportunity to get some good run with the ones this season as it continues to go on. Makari Vickers is another guy that we saw a lot of him a year ago, but has he been passed up by, whether it's Des Malone from the transfer portal or a couple of younger guys that have just simply, continued to develop, continue to get bigger, stronger, more comfortable and familiar with the scheme that this defense is running. I cannot wait to watch this rotation of cornerbacks as well. And Adam, I thought that it was interesting too. Kani Walker, over the last 8 months, especially his best 8 months since he's been on campus, Brent Venables actually said he's been the most consistent corner at practice. Is this coach speak, or do you think there's some actual validity to this? Because, not only when Brent Venables is talking to the media, he's not just talking to the media, he's not just talking to the fan base, he's talking to his own guys in that locker room. So maybe this is a little bit of coach speak where he's trying to get somebody's attention, he's trying to, push somebody along, trying to challenge him a little bit. I just wonder how much validity there is to Kani Walker.
I'll buy the Kani hype because I've seen him at least play quite a bit over the last 2 years, and I think he was decent. Nothing spectacular, but I think he was decent in the time that we've seen him so far. I believe he was also on the field with the ones when Peyton Bowen had that crazy interception a few weeks back that was caught on video. He was there with the crazy eyes looking at Peyton Bowen when that happened. So I think there's something legitimate there to Kani. I don't think he's going to be the best corner and all conference talent or anything like that, but I think he's someone reliable that you can say, hey, we have to put someone in. Gentry's hurt, or Woody's, moving over to a different position, or whatever that might be. I buy that a little bit. Des Malone's an interesting one. That was a call out that we got on Twitter when we said, hey, who's going to be a household name? Sooner Script said Des Malone. Danny Gray said Jacoby Johnson. I mean, there's going to be opportunities for those guys, especially if Woody is the guy that moves around. I don't know what that looks like exactly. In my mind, I kind of think it's, hey, if there's, third and long passing situation, Woody might move into a slot corner position and maybe bring on a Des Malone or something like that. Des might be the most mysterious player on this defense for me at this point. I'm just kind of curious because he looks too big to play corner in a sense.
This is not me trying to take a shot at Trey Norwood or Trey Brown. Obviously, two guys both, having pretty good careers in the NFL right now, but gone are the days where you look out there and you've got guys playing at 5'9" and 5'10" at the quarterback position. These are all guys that Oakland's going to be, throwing out there, talking about Gentry, talking about Dez, Jacoby, Kani Walker as well. These are guys that are going to be 6 foot, 6'1", 6'2". They've got some size and length to them. This is something that, Brent Venables, when he got on campus, when he got back here and he saw what he had in that room, he said, okay, we've got to adapt a little bit. We've got to change our, focus when evaluating some of these players, not just, how they play the game, but kind of evaluating the body type as well, because, it wasn't always this case in the SEC, but it's definitely sped up over the last 5 to 6 years. It's a quarterback and wide receivers league in the SEC now, so you got to be able to hold up there in coverage out there on the perimeter.
When you move over to the safety position, you've got 3 guys that you feel really good about. Billy Bowman, spectacular All-American candidate. I believe he's one of the on the watch list for Bronco Nagurski Award along with Danny Stutsman already.
Yep.
You've got Peyton Bowen, who, yes, he had some injuries, some nicks and bumps last year, but when he was on the field, he made plays. You kind of wonder, why weren't there more turnovers? It felt like he was so close so many times, but I think you like the trajectory of where he's headed right now. Robert Spears Jennings, I think we've seen some really good things out of him as well. So you have 3 guys that you feel really comfortable with. My question is, after that, who's number 4, who's number 5, and how comfortable do you feel with those guys?
This is the position group on this football team that I'm the most excited about to watch. We all know about Billy Bowman. We know what he brings to the table. He's arguably, I think he is the best defensive back in America. Should have won the Thorpe Award last year. But you look at what Brandon Hall has done from a recruiting standpoint, bringing in Robert Spears Jennings, who really there's been some hype around RSJ, but when you watch this guy, you watch how he played a year ago, and then you hear from guys like Teddy Lehman and Rufus and Curtis Lofton, who have talked about how, RSJ is a guy that he's really been one of the leaders in that secondary, even though this is Billy's room, but he's taken a huge step over the last 8 months or so. We all know about Peyton Bowen. I think that this is finally the year that you really start to see him get, a larger bulk of the reps in that rotation as well. And then the guy that I am most excited about to watch in that Oklahoma secondary this year, he's not going to start, but I think that he's just simply going to be too good, too physical, too good of an athlete to keep off the field. I cannot wait to watch Michael Boganowski in an Oklahoma uniform this year. We got a small taste of it in the spring game. He did get the personal foul penalty, knocked the shit out of one of his own teammates. But the way that he plays the game, the way that he approaches it each and every down, I cannot wait to watch Michael Boganowski, tee it up this year.
He's one too that I almost feel like, is he too big to play safety? Almost like a Taylor Mays. That's a really old throwback to USC's 6'5" safety back in the day. So it makes me feel like,
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It feels big. He looks bigger than that out on the field. It makes me wonder if he's better suited to work out at Cheetah at some point. And maybe that's where they have him. And there's similarities to the safety position there. But it makes me wonder there. But I am excited to see him because that dude is fearless. And maybe maybe it's just because he's a freshman. He's trying to do too much. We'll see. But yeah, I think there's a lot of talent there between Jaden Harden and Reggie Powers as well in that room. Maybe even Jaden Rowe potentially can see the field at some point this year. But I think there's a lot of talent there. It's just I want to feel a little bit better about what else we have in that room beyond just those three guys.
Sure.
And Robert Spears Jennings, I should mention, Brent called him out in the press conference, or not a press conference, but talking to the press earlier today, saying that he was, I guess actually this was from Robert Spears Jennings, I should say. He said, as a defense, they want to be fast, they want to be physical, they want to be violent, and I love hearing those very straight to the point like mentality that they have there. I think that harkens back a lot to Brent Venables' first press conference that he did when he became coach at Oklahoma. Talking about the defense that he wanted to have here at Oklahoma. So you'd love to hear that. I think that's leadership and the guys buying in completely.
Last thing I'll say on this, Adam, then we'll move on to punt returner and kick returners. I know that a lot of the credit, a lot of the accolades, and a lot of the, hype is being centered around the big three of Billy Bowman, Robert Spears Jennings, and Peyton Bowen. But don't sleep on guys like Jaden Hardy and Reggie Powers, two true freshmen, guys that when you listen to Brandon Hall, you listen to Brent Venables, the way that they talk about these two guys. These are two players that, yes, they are young. They're only 18 years old. They are extremely excited about the possibilities and the future of these two players now that they're in an Oklahoma uniform. But yeah, safety position, like I said, this is by far and away, and I'll even throw the whole secondary in here as well. This is the most excited and eager I've been to watch an Oklahoma secondary maybe since the days of Derek Strait and Antoine Savage, and you got to go far back. We were we weren't very tall during those playing days, but yeah, I think that on paper this is by far and away, I think that this is Oklahoma's best secondary in quite some time.
Let's go through some Twitter responses that we got as far as who you guys want to see as kick and punt returners. Kind of rapid fire this. I want to get your thoughts on each one of these guys, Tyler, and then we'll cover anybody else that wasn't mentioned after we get through these responses. But Sooner Script saying Sam Franklin, dynamic, explosive guy out of that running back room that we didn't talk about a whole ton last week on the offensive preview, but maybe there's a role for him back there returning kicks.
Yeah, it could be. I've kind of changed my tune a little bit. I know that this is something that you guys have really gone to town on me for over the last couple of seasons, where I haven't necessarily been one for, putting your best possible player or athlete at the punt or kick returner positions, just from a health standpoint. Obviously the Billy Bowman TCU game, that's the thing that comes to mind for me, but I have kind of come around to it a little bit. Sam Franklin, that is an interesting possibility. We haven't seen, hardly any of him, ultimately just because he is a transfer addition, but yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it.
We haven't seen a ton of running backs returning kicks in Norman, maybe Marcellus Sutton, TJ Pledger, Alex Ross, DeMarco, Adrian Peterson. I mean, we're going way back to list that many guys. So that could be interesting. How about this one from Pass Me the Black and Mild? He says, Jaleel Farouk. That one's interesting because I feel like most people have kind of said, he can't do it anymore. He fumbles, but yet we know he's going to play wide receiver. And honestly, he would be, I think, one of the best options back there, but you get nervous.
Probably more so on the punt return side of things. But it's not a bad option. Now, do I think that there's probably a couple more guys that are maybe a little bit more athletic, a little bit more game-breaking speed that would be better suited for that type of role? Yeah, I think so. I'll name a couple of them here in just a little bit, but I mean, yes, he did kind of battle the fumble issue towards the end of last season, but again, I still think that he's a sure-handed guy that Brent's going to have a lot of confidence in if you had to throw him back there.
This one from Waterboy H2O, you'd be probably burning some red shirts if you go this route. One of the Zions, either Zion Dragons or Zion Kearney.
Yeah, I've got Zion Kearney as one of my options as well, both as a punt and a kick returner. I think that's a really good option. I think that Zion Raggins, when you look at the size and the frame, I think he's measured in right now about 5'8", 150 or 160 pounds. That's not ideal when you look at some of the teams. Their kickoff teams, their punt cover teams. That is a little bit scary when you talk about some of the impacts that could be had when that tackle is made. But I like the Zion Kearney one. I had him in my top 3 as well. I think that would be a solid addition, a guy that gives you, both good size, good vision, but he also has that speed, and he's a difference maker with the ball in his hand.
Back to the running back room with this submission from Automotive Coach. Says Taylor Tatum, need to get him on the field.
Yeah, if it was up to me, they said, Tyler, here you go. Here's the depth chart. Taylor Tatum would be my starting kickoff returner. I would have him and Deion Burks both back there returning kicks.
Yeah. Jay on Twitter says Petaway or Thompson out of the wide receiver room. Both guys that should have a lot of speed. I think for Petaway, I think that is interesting. I would like to see him at punt returner as well, potentially, because, more playing time for a guy that maybe, hopefully he breaks through in the receiver department, but maybe not. And maybe this is his role that helps him contribute to the team's success.
Yeah, you took all 3 of mine right there. I had Taylor Tatum and Deion Burks at the kick returner position, and then I had Jaquez Petaway at the punt return spot as well. Kind of a sleeper pick. I don't know how much consideration is being given in. We'll see ultimately as the season unfolds. Jacoby Johnson is another one. Played a lot of wide receiver in high school. Fantastic athlete, one of the faster guys on this team. I think Jacoby Johnson could be a guy that, he may not be, part of that first, 2 or 3 guys at the cornerback position, but that could be his opportunity to be to make a play, make an impact on the game at one of those skill positions.
A lot of people also threw out the name Peyton Bowen, but we just talked about the safety room, and maybe that's one position group that you would like to see more depth in. How confident would you be if we had to put him out there?
I'm a huge, if he's back there, I like it. I think that Peyton Bowen, maybe it's just because we saw it a year ago. Let's let him rush the punter. Let's let him go for the block. He's pretty good at that.
There you go. I love it. That's going to be a wrap for us.
What do we got next week, Adam?
Next week, we're doing a schedule breakdown. So that one should be pretty fun. We'll go game by game.
Yep.
With some interesting questions along the way. And we'll get ourselves tied up in some predictions that we will probably regret halfway through the year, but we'll do it. It'll be fun. And then the week after that, it'll be game week, which means we'll be previewing Temple. We'll be back with our 5 best bets of the week for each of us in a competition that will probably drive us crazy and result in a lot of smack talk. So we appreciate everyone joining us for this week for the main line. We'll see y'all next week.